Some Illinois lawmakers think penalties should be tougher for distracted drivers who kill people.
But it is still unclear how to determine whether drivers were negligent and what the standard should be to get a conviction in court.
ABC News Channel 15's Kathy Morris investigates in tonight's special report. Kathy.
Kent and Jennifer, this story centers around 3 families and how on 3 different days within the last year, their lives were changed forever. Brandon Suits hit in Champaign while on a skateboard September 18th, 2005. Dead 1 day later.
He didn't pay attention, and it resulted in the death of my child.
George Harvey killed on Highway 150 near Mansfield while driving his vehicle October 15th, 2005.
Our lives were shattered on that day.
Matthew Wilhelm struck on Highway 130 east of Urbana while on his bicycle on September 2nd, 2006. He died after 6 days in the hospital.
So he was just going for a ride out in the country because that's what he loved to do.
3 young lives gone.
Just very sad and frustrated.
3 young drivers involved in 3 separate fatal accidents, all learning a tough lesson in life.
I was at an angle and he hit me like this and spun off into the ditch, and I spun around.
Christopher Walker says a dog jumping inside of his vehicle caused him to hit 34-year-old George Harvey. Had it not been for the trace amounts of marijuana in Walker's body he says he smoked 2 days before, the only charge the state's attorney says she could have given him was improper traffic lane usage, a petty offense.
If it was a deer that ran out or, ice on the road or whatever, that to me would be more like an accident. But this to me was just being irresponsible.
That is the only charge Jennifer Stark was given after she hit 25-year-old Matthew Wilhelm. She was downloading a ringtone onto her cellular phone.
I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe anybody would do that.
Some lawmakers say Illinois laws are outdated. That could soon change, though, through an initiative in Champaign County to create a negligent vehicular homicide misdemeanor charge.
I'm not necessarily saying that people who are negligent need to be sent to jail, but we do need to have additional tools.
Hopefully between all of us we can get something done that will be an improvement for all of us.
I just think people need to step up and try to make a difference.
Their efforts will be at full speed until the statutes are changed.
We try to do things in a very positive way with legislation, education, and doing what we can.
Until then, life rolls on for all of these families.
I'm sorry, it hurt. I think about it every day. I see it every day.
Their physical and emotional wounds are slowly healing.
He would want us to go on and just try to live a good life.
But their time behind the wheel will never be the same. Julia Reitz has sent a preliminary draft of that negligent vehicular homicide code to state representatives Bill Black and Chapin Rose. Black will meet with attorneys, police chiefs, and sheriffs during the current veto session. He wants to improve Illinois laws while ensuring a jury's guilty verdict is possible. Kent.
Kathy, thank you. Jennifer Stark pleaded guilty to the improper lane usage charge in the Matt Wilhelm case. She'll be sentenced later this month. Meanwhile, McKinley Duncan was charged with leaving the scene of an accident and not providing help. He was sentenced to a year in jail, the maximum allowed by law.
My husband Chuck, and we're here to talk to you about Matt. And we're also here to really ask you for your help. We're not asking you for money, which is probably good because I know high school kids don't have a lot of money. We're not asking you for your time because I know you're really probably book solid. We're asking you for your ideas. We're not even going to ask you to write a paper. We just want your ideas on what we can do to help get the message across to people that cell phones and driving don't mix, just like alcohol and driving don't mix. We've talked to a lot of schools. We've talked to a lot of different groups. And we're really pleased to be here because I know that this particular program has gotten some wonderful awards and a lot of publicity. Okay, so I really need your help today to help us figure out what we can do to get the message across to people.
People ages 16 to 19. Okay, this is Matt at his sister's wedding a year and a half ago. He was in a tux. He didn't like to wear tux very often. He didn't even like to wear tux to the prom, but he had to this time. And this was a year and a half ago, and he was supposed to be in his brother's wedding this past September 9th, just a few months ago. He didn't make it to his brother's wedding because he died the day before his brother's wedding of massive head injuries. He died on September 8th. He was at Carl ICU for 6 days. Here's a baby picture of Matt when he was about 2. He was always curious, always active, always had a smile on his face, always kind of getting into things. He was always happy, most of the time. Here he is with his 2 older brothers, Brad and Jeff, and here's Matt over here and his younger sister, Lisa. And they were always a close bunch of kids. They really kept me busy having 4 kids that close together. Every year at Thanksgiving, we take an updated picture just like this with all of us. This year at Thanksgiving, I couldn't take an updated picture because Matt wasn't there. And I don't think I'll ever in my life be able to take an updated picture because Matt will never be there. And we'll never be able to celebrate the holidays with Matt. And it was hard this year, but we got through it because we had the rest of our family there and a lot of our friends there. Our lives are forever changed because of something that happened a couple months ago. And our lives are basically shattered. In a beautiful fall day, it was September 2nd this past year. And I remember the date because it was our anniversary when we were celebrating in Chicago. Matt was on campus visiting friends. He had just graduated with a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and he started his first job at Caterpillar. He was back here visiting friends, and it was a gorgeous day, so he decided to do something that he loves doing. Riding a bike, kind of out in East Urbana, where it was kind of out of the way. And I know a lot of high school students don't ride bikes, but a lot of college kids do, and a lot of adults do, kind of like as a stress reliever, as a hobby. So he was riding his bike, totally on the side of the road, kind of by the bike path, way off on the side where he was supposed to, on a gorgeous day. It was daylight. The weather was perfect. He had on a helmet, which he always wore. He was always really careful when he was riding his bike. He had on like red clothing. He had on reflectors on the back of his bike. So he should have been easily seen. Unfortunately, he wasn't seen by the girl who hit him, who was 19 years old, and she had 3 major violations in the period of 17 months. 2 of them were for speeding. 1 of them was for going through a traffic signal. He was riding his bike way off on the side of the road. She was looking down, totally down, with her eyes totally off the road, downloading ringtones on her cell phone while she was driving, probably between 55 and 60 miles an hour. Her car was so far off the side of the road that she hit him, and he was way off, like on the bike path, way off on the pavement. She hit him with the driver's side of her car when he was riding. That's how far off the side of the road she was. So if you can picture this, here's the car, here's the bike pathway over here. She was so far off, she was way over there. She didn't even realize she was off the road. She was looking completely down. She told the state trooper who came to the hospital, "I was looking down, downloading ringtones. When I looked up, it was too late to stop." So she hit him with the full force of her car, which I don't know how many tons it weighs. I'm sure you probably know from studying it in driver's ed. She had to be going at least 60. And she hit him with the full force of her car. He had absolutely no warning, no way to jump out of the side, no way to move, because she was going so fast and she was so far off from where she was supposed to be. When we saw the accident report, she hit him with such force that the bike flew one way and landed in the other lane, and a passing motorist had to stop and move it because it was in the line of traffic. And he went the other way and landed headfirst onto the pavement with full force. And even though he had a helmet, it wasn't enough to save him from the traumatic brain injuries that eventually killed him. He spent 6 horrible days at Carl Intensive Care. It's called ICU. The doctors there did everything they could because we asked a lot of questions. We never ever left his side for 6 days. He died 3:30 in the morning, the day before his brother's wedding. That was the wedding he was supposed to be in. And when Matt died, he took part of my heart with him. The only way I can continue to go on and to live with a broken heart is to make people realize somehow that the way they currently use cell phones, iPods, Blackberries, or any of this other technology seriously endangers not just their life, the life of the driver, but the lives of totally innocent people like Matt. This girl was so out of touch with what she was doing, and her eyes were so far off the road that she could have been in the other lane and hit a family van head on. She could have hit a school bus. She could have hit a group of joggers, because there are joggers out there are bicyclists out there all the time. So these people who were using this kind of technology, text messaging, talking, looking down to key in numbers, are not just endangering their lives, but they're endangering the lives of a lot of other innocent people. And everyone thinks it can't happen to them. We never thought this could happen to us either. I mean, everyone says teenagers are invincible. Well, we never thought anything like this could happen. We never had anything bad happen in our family. We had 4 kids who went to school. They were in sports. They were really close. They got together every holiday, every birthday. We went on vacations. Everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, the bottom literally fell out of our family. And everyone misses him horribly because he was an important part of the family. He was helping his sister through a lot of things in college, and he had a lot of friends on campus. So if it can happen to us, it can happen to anybody, because we were very, very careful on how we drove and where he rode his bike. He always wore a helmet. The state trooper said he was doing everything right. When the state trooper came to the hospital and talked to me, he said, "Your son did nothing wrong." But it didn't matter, because I'll tell you in a minute what happened to this girl who had all these driving offenses. We're talking right now to driver's ed classes, we're talking to local politicians, and we're talking to state legislators in Springfield about trying to pass a law, which we'll explain in a minute. It's called the Negligent Vehicle Homicide Law, in order to try to have more severe penalties besides just what happened to this girl. And we're also trying to get people to voluntarily stop using their cell phones while they are driving, to think of something else, to put it on silent, to put it to voicemail or whatever, to have someone else in the car answer it. We're trying to get people to voluntarily stop using their cell phones. A lot of people in Champaign and Urbana, and where we live up by Bourbonnais and around Chicago, have already voluntarily stopped using it while they're driving. And we're not trying to take away people's rights by saying you can't do this, you can't do that. What we're trying to do is protect innocent people. People just like Matt, or people like you'll see in the video in just a few minutes. Because when actions that are deliberate and dangerous seriously endanger innocent people, something needs to change. And we are positive that this is going to get a lot worse very quickly before it ever gets better if something doesn't change. And you can't begin to imagine how painful it is to lose someone in your family to something that's so preventable. This was not an accident where a vehicle hit an ice patch or a deer ran out or they swerved to hit a dog or anything like that. That would have been truly almost something you couldn't prevent. This was something that could have been prevented. If only this girl had her eyes on the road instead of looking down at her cell phone, she would have seen Matt on the side of the road, because he was clearly visible. He was wearing like a red jacket or a red shirt. He was clearly visible. I don't want another mom to experience what I did watching Matt die before my eyes. And when I was sitting in that hospital room talking to him in the middle of the night, and I just knew he wasn't going to make it because the doctors were doing everything they could, and the doctors there were very good because it's a trauma center. I kept thinking, the only way I can get through this is to try to prevent another mom from this horrible heartbreak. Because watching one of your own kids, no matter how old they are, die before your eyes, and watching your husband and your other kids face this is the most horrible thing a parent can go through. So that's why we're trying to ask people's help and what we can do to get the message out. So please think of a way to help us reach out to others. What can we do to convince people, especially people ages 16 to 19, that this is so dangerous and that these kind of accidents are preventable? The reason I say accidents, because I say it in quotes basically, because I met the CEO of MAD. That's the top person from Mothers Against Drunk Driving. When we were in Springfield a couple weeks ago, I met him and I told him our story. He was down there for a meeting. And he said, in Mothers Against Drunk Driving, they don't even call these accidents. They call them crashes, because most accidents are preventable if people are just paying attention. Most of these accidents are caused by deliberate and dangerous driving behavior. That's why they're preventable, and that's why he calls them crashes. And locally, channels 3, 15, 17, the News Gazette, the Daily Illini, and other newspapers have given us a lot of publicity. They've called us, they've put the story on the front page. We've been on a lot of TV stations, and we're trying to get something in Chicago right now because they've done a lot on distracted driving. And in a few minutes, you'll see a very short DVD where someone from Channel 15 came to interview 3 families. And it's pretty touching, especially the part where a father was killed and left 3 little kids behind, and what the mom has to say. And I think of her every time I go out and do this, because she can't go out and do this, and she has 3 little kids at home. So that's why I'm trying to get out and talk to other young people who have a lot of influence and a lot of power and a lot of good ideas. We're trying to get them to realize. Okay, Chuck will show you what has been in the newspaper and a pamphlet that we have.
We were on the front page of the News Gazette. It says Hope, Resolve, Live On, and it's a story of the whole day's events, of how it affected our family and what the accident situation was, what occurred. It has on the front page here a copy of, or a picture of the cross that's out at the accident site. You see those commonly along the interstate when you're driving along the highways. And then they also, once again, had the picture we just showed you a second ago when he was 2 years old. And that publicity was really helpful. Then we had another front page article that appeared in the Kankakee Daily Journal. This was in just a few weeks ago, and once again they gave the full story of what happened. And we find this helpful in getting the word out, because everybody is realizing it's becoming more predominant. Every time you go out for a drive, you see people using technologies that are interfering with their driving. And thus our focus is on distracted driving. The other thing we're doing is we had one of Matt's cousins made up an emblem for us, and this happens to be a steering wheel. It's got Matt's picture on the bottom part, and on the top section it's got 3 pictures with the international symbol of prohibiting them. One is an iPod, the other is reading newspapers, and last is cell phone use. And we've found that to be so effective that we end up including it on a pamphlet that we were taking around to the legislators. We went to Springfield in November and we visited with senators and representatives, and this was part to leave them with a written message of what we're trying to accomplish. And we start off with the emblem, and as you open it up, there's a orange section in here, and this is our mission, which states that we're not trying just to outlaw cell phone use. We're trying to stop distracted driving, to do it through education and also through new legislation, so that people will reduce the amount of interactive technology that they have in cars and drive safer. As you open up the brochure, we've got over here a picture of Matt when he was up in the Rockies this summer. He was just an outdoors type guy, loved to be outdoors. On this side is a write-up of the accident, and then down at the bottom, once again, we talk about education being one of our focuses, and then what the legislative changes we're looking for. And the reason we're looking for a legislative change is the driver in this accident ended up getting hit with a petty offense. Petty offense is usually a $1 fine. We don't have on the state of Illinois books a misdemeanor or a felony for driving reckless or really dangerous. And so one of the things we're trying to do is get legislation passed that would put a law like that on the books. And on the very back of the brochure, an interesting section we have is on some stats, and one of the most interesting I find is that they find in the research they've done, people that have distracted driving, their driving is degraded more than drunken driving. I mean, and that's all we hear about, and that's what all the laws are about, and that's where you can get hit with felonies. But here, you're looking at the degrading thing of doing cell phone, text messages, and all those things. That can degrade your driving more than being drunk.
And it has to do with your concentration when you're talking on a phone. It has to do with your concentration when you're talking on a phone, even cordless phones, or when you're text messaging, as opposed to just talking to someone within the vehicle. It's a lot more distracting. And we mentioned before that this girl had 3 serious driving offenses, 2 for speeding and 1 for going through a traffic signal. And so this 4th one was a fatality, despite the fact that it was her 4th offense. She was charged with improper lane usage. That was the only charge, which would be the same thing as if someone had accidentally veered over to the other lane, just doing something, a lot less serious than that. But just because she was so negligent and so careless in what she was doing, it didn't make a difference in the eyes of the law specifically right now, and according to what she was charged. This has been a very controversial case within Champaign County, and it's been in the newspapers. Actually, ever since it started, there have been a lot of letters that have been written to the editor. A lot of people have been outraged that this girl basically got nothing except a fine for killing someone and for doing something so outrageous. So that's why we're trying to get things changed. We've talked to a lot of legislators throughout the state. It's a bipartisan effort, which means we're going with just Democrats and Republicans. Also, we're trying to get them to work together. And we've gotten a lot of positive support because we think something more serious should happen to her. And as of right now, she is not even going to have her license revoked. It will just be suspended. And it had to do with some problems within the reporting system. And so we're working with the Secretary of State, we're working with Jesse White, we're working with the county clerk and a lot of different offices, the state's attorney's office, in order to try to get things changed so that when all of you are out driving, hopefully the roads will be a little bit safer because people will be more aware of some of these dangers, and because the reporting and the enforcement will be better, and people will be more aware of some of the problems. So before we go on, we're going to show you a DVD in just a few minutes, and I'm going to read part of a victim impact statement, which is very short. Do you have any questions so far about why this happened, or what happened to her, or anything else about how?
What did you guys as parents want to happen to that girl?
What we wanted to happen, we met with the state's attorney. We are not saying a 19-year-old girl should go to jail. We never ever said that. We wanted her to be able to come talk to high school classes, do community service, do something besides just paying a fine. Because you pay the fine and you forget about it. That's all. Especially in sight of the fact that she had 3 chances. She had 3 serious offenses, and she didn't even go to Parkland Driving School as she was supposed to. But in this case, supposedly, it did not make a difference. They did not look at her prior offenses. They just looked at this. And they felt that this particular case, as outrageous as it was, did not fit the criteria for reckless driving, which would be a felony. And that's why we're trying to have another law on the books called negligent driving, which means you're neglecting your job. And your job is to just drive, not be doing all these other things. So that's basically what we wanted. We wanted something else. If it were up to me, I would have asked the judge to have that girl come with me and Matt's sister and 2 brothers and Chuck and go to the cemetery with us and go look at his gravestone and see what she did. That's what I would have done. But I think that would have made an impact and would have helped her remember more than just paying a fine. I mean, a lot of people know, I don't ever mention her name, a lot of people know who she is. And, she has, paid the price that way. But it would be different if this were the first thing that happened, but this was not the first thing that's happened. This was the 4th thing that happened in a short amount of time. So that's why we think something else should have been done. Okay, before I read my victim impact statement, does anyone else have any other questions? Yes, sir.
In the court, while you guys were in court, did she show any emotions at all? Did it even matter that what she had done?
A lot of people asked if she had ever tried to contact her, if we met her. Well, we never did meet her before the court date. This happened, Matt was hit September 2nd, which was a Saturday. He died the following Friday. And his brother's wedding was the next day. And about 2 months later was her sentencing in the courtroom in Urbana. And we were there, and she was there with her parents. And there were just a few other people there that we invited, and the judge. And basically, she was up there by herself. She looked pretty much afraid by that time. And she was crying when I started reading part of my victim impact statement, which I'll just read a very short part of it to you. So that was basically her reaction, but she never talked to us or anything like that, which I would not want to talk to her anyhow. I mean, you know, there's really nothing to say.
So no letter, no?
She wrote us a letter, a very short letter at the very, very beginning, you know, just saying she was sorry, which I'm sure she probably is, because her life has also changed. And that's something else that you'll see on the video with another teenager whose life has changed forever.
So there's no way, did it show any attempt that she tried to turn a wheel at all?
Pardon me?
I know she said she saw him and there's nothing she could do, but is there no way she could have?
She actually said she was too close, there was nothing that she could do.
Is that what you mean, Mrs. Jones? No, she said, I was looking down. When I looked up, I saw him. It was too late to stop. And that part makes me sick as a mom. That's the part that's given me yeah.
Too late to stop.
Too late to stop.
Could you swear?
Just,
Sure.
you know, it's better to hit a ditch
No.
than
Right.
hit a
Yeah.
human being.
How did it affect the wedding?
We went on with the wedding. We did go on the next day. It was kind of a tough decision because my son was there the entire time in intensive care with us. I mean, my whole family was there. My son was there and his fiance. The whole family was there. And so instead of being back in Chicago planning their wedding, they're watching their brother die. And we did have the wedding the next day, and it was touching, and it was beautiful. So we went, I don't know why, I thought I shut that off, I'm sorry. We basically went from a funeral we went from Matt dying in the hospital, and we decided to donate his organs, which was a good decision. And then we went to the wedding the next day, and then we went to the visitation at the funeral home, and then we went to the burial the next day. It was absolutely intense. So it was really pretty tough. When we were in the courtroom, I'd never really been to a courtroom before. I didn't know what to expect. This was her sentencing. The charges were she already knew what the charges were from the state's attorney. It was just improper lane usage, so we knew the only thing she could get would be pay some money, and that's it. And the Secretary of State, Jesse White, is the one who would decide whether or not to suspend her license. Right now, her license is suspended because of all her previous offenses. But when we were in the courtroom, I was allowed to make what's called a victim impact statement, which means, how did this affect me as a mom? How did this affect our whole family? And I'll just read two very short parts of it. And this is what I read to the girl, looking at her and looking at her mom. Matt was robbed, and we were robbed. We could never look in his eyes and say, we love you, or goodbye. He was in a coma until the day he died, the day before his brother's wedding. He'll never have the chance for his own wedding. We'll never get to see his kids. He was great with kids, and he'll never have his own. All because someone was looking down instead of keeping her eyes on the road and her mind on driving. We have nightmares of Matt's last moments when he was riding way off to the side of the road on a clear, beautiful day and was hit with no warning at all. A person told me they saw the accident scene, and it was something no mother should have to witness, all for a cell phone ringtone. That was part of what I read in court to her, and of course by this time she was crying when she realized what she had done to a family, because our family is very close, and all four of our kids did a lot together, and everyone said parents' worst nightmare is to bury one of your kids, and it is. Love to hear any of your ideas of the best way to get the point across. We'll be meeting with people at U of I in a couple weeks again. We've met with people from the Chancellor's office, and we'll be making presentations before the Safety Committee and between some Okay, what do you think we can do besides going to driver's ed classes, which is what we've done? We're going on campus, we're talking to legislators, and they've been very supportive. Some people have suggested billboards or bumper stickers are distracting in themselves because you find yourself maybe stopping to read them. Hopefully people are just reading them when they're in, a stopped position.
Have you thought of maybe a commercial?
Yes, we have. We've thought of making a video. We're trying to work on something like that. Where would we show this commercial? Where would be the most effective place to show something like this?
On TV stations that teenagers usually watch. Like, I know we showed ours on Channel 3 right before the news. And,
right before the
what are some other teenage?
We put ours on at the drive-in theater too, and the movie theaters before they show the main feature.
Oh, before they show the main feature.
And then IDOT helped us, and like before prom or homecoming, we ran them. They track all the stations that teens watch, like ESPN and all these, and they plugged it in 506 commercials to different slots. And coming back that next day, like everybody in our school had seen it.
Everyone had seen it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an idea. That's something that we thought of. A lot of these things do take money, and of course right now we just basically started this, and we do have a website. Mrs. Jones has a copy of the pamphlet, and the website's on the very back and the bottom. It has pictures and it has details of the accident, and we basically don't have money since we're kind of doing this on our own right now, and so we're trying to look for some sponsors, possibly at different places in Champaign, because we're setting up a non-for-profit status. So a lot of that does take money, and we're trying to partner with other companies. What are some other ideas that might work? Is there a way to reach people via, I know we do have a link to MySpace. There is a link to that, and to something called Caring Bridge, which I didn't even know about. It was when Matt was in the hospital, they set up a website on something called caringbridge.com, and it was the story, and other people could write in and tell what they remember of Matt, and there were, I think, like 10,000 hits in maybe 3 days or something unbelievable like that. Like 10,000 different times different people had gone on it from all across the country. So that was a fabulous way to bring people together.
Like I said before, like YouTube and being able to, whatever commercial you make, put it on your website so they can download it into iPods so they can get it in other teens' hands as they pass it around to each other.
So that's what we'd have to do, is put it on the website.
Yeah.
Okay?
You can ask Kevin how he did that.
Okay,
He did it with
yeah,
ours.
well, we do have people like that in our family that are technologically adept at something like that. Did you have any questions about anything that happened to this girl, or what you think kind of penalty should be? That's why we're just going for something that would be a little bit more of a deterrent. Because now her life has changed forever too, because it's been in the media.
Even though I've never seen a picture of her, I wouldn't even know what she looks like. Did you see her?
She should have gotten a lot more than what she did. She got just a slap on the wrist for killing somebody, for taking a life away from somebody. She should have got a lot more than what she did.
What do you think she should have gotten?
Personally, I think she should have gotten jail time.
You think she should? Well, do you want to share that one story? Talking about jail time, someone else did get jail time for doing something similar.
Well, in the video report, there are situations if you have circumstances in addition like this. One person said they had had marijuana a few days before. That's what contributed to them getting some jail time. There was also one in Newsweek. This was back in October. And it was an 18-year-old who was text messaging. He was out on a date, and he said, I remember hearing my girlfriend scream. So he wasn't even watching the road, didn't even know what was going on. He just heard her scream first, then looked up. He says he recalls the tragic sounds of a car accident last year in which he killed a bicyclist. And he ended up getting jail time for that. The thing I found interesting in the write-up, though, is they said that out of a survey they took of teenage drivers, 37% ranked texting as extremely or very distracting. It makes you wonder, what if do the other 63% think it's not that bad of a problem? That's the problem then. Because you can tell from these situations, what's happening is people don't know until they're right up on a pedestrian or bicyclist or maybe another vehicle. that they're going to hit them. And boy, at that time, then you've not had a chance to get out of the way, you've not had a chance to brake, and if you've studied in here the implications of speed and mass, hitting a vehicle or an individual with a 3,000-pound vehicle is going to be just devastating.
Well, like I mentioned in the class, I don't think the 16 to 17-year-old cell phone law is working because the police officers don't know who 16 and 17-year-old, and I haven't seen any tickets written on that. So I think they've just got to eliminate people using the cell phones when they drive. It would be the only way to be able to enforce it properly.
So you think it should be like that for everyone across the board, that it should be?
Like you said, except for maybe your law enforcement.
Except for law enforcement, right.
And I know politicians wouldn't like that. Because
right.
I know they're on phone equipment too. So that's the ones who kind of have to
true.
push it through. So I know the battle that you're fighting there to try to get that one through.
Now we're just trying to create an awareness of how it really is dangerous to be doing this. And is there anyone else who thinks that there should be a different kind of deterrent, maybe besides jail? Is there anything in between putting a 19-year-old girl in jail for doing something like this, or maybe even a weekend in jail, instead of just having her parents write out a check for a fine, and that's it. And then she just goes on her way. And she can celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas, she can get married, she can have kids, she can live her life. And the rest of us can't, because our lives are forever changed, just because of a really careless, self-indulgent move on her part.
She should have to ride a bike everywhere.
Honestly, that was mentioned quite a few times. We have what's called a coalition, which means it's a group of people aiming toward the same goals. And within that group, there are quite a few bicyclists, especially in Champaign-Urbana and across the entire state, not just across the state, but across the country, because this has shown up on a lot of websites. And the bikers are outraged, of course, because this just is basically nothing as far as a penalty. And so they said she should have to ride a bike wherever she goes, indefinitely. But unfortunately, that wasn't something that the judge could enforce.
This girl shouldn't have a license. She shouldn't have the right to drive.
I agree. She should not have the right to drive because she's going to be in danger, and she will be back on the roads in less than a year, despite all the pleading and all the calling and all the notes that we've done, because there were so many mistakes made in this case. And we're trying to clarify a lot of the mistakes with Jesse White, the Secretary of State, with the state's attorney, with the reporting system. There were a lot of mistakes made within the system that they weren't even aware of. So she'll be back on the road. So, for one, I'm glad I don't live around here anymore, actually, because you may see her when you're out driving, and that's why this is so important. You're right. I don't think she should have a license. Since she had 2 speeding tickets, disregarding a traffic signal, and wouldn't even go to the Parkland driving school, and then she killed someone by being careless and reckless. Okay, you've been very good listeners. Any other ideas at all or suggestions on what we can do to get the point across? Do billboards work? Do bumper stickers work? Is it better to put something on our website that people can download? Is it better to have commercials? Just talk to people? Do you have an idea of what you think is the most effective?
Our kids last year thought that, maybe there's different groups that change through, but we're in such a media, they're going to sit down and read a book, and they're going to,
right.
The media is where it's at, so it's got to be on TV, commercials, where they
websites,
go, movie theaters. Like I mentioned to you, as we were going to lunch, even fast food places, you could put safety messages along as people are waiting at the drive-up.
That's probably a good point. Yes?
Have you guys thought about, like, when you can fund it, making T-shirts and advertising?
Yeah, that's been suggested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have a lot of good ideas. We thank you very much for being so attentive and listening. If you have any other ideas, we're in constant contact with Mrs. Jones, and we're going to be having other meetings for brainstorming ideas.
Or you can go onto the website that's listed up on the board, mattslaw.org, and leave your comments.
Yeah, we welcome comments, because you can just give a suggestion. It's just totally free ideas. We're willing to listen to anyone that has any kind of logical ideas of what we can do, because this has really affected a lot of people.
Did the parents ever say anything to you?
No.
Never.
No.
Really?
Never.